Good afternoon, Chicagoland, and welcome to another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NIRPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lissick, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
Well, good morning. This is Carl Lissick, and thank you for that introduction. Today, our guest is Miss Belinda Petroskey. She's a transit planner with the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, or NIRPC. Belinda, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Boy, it just seems like yesterday that you were here, and here you are, our second guest on WIMS on the Green Radio Network, and so, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, when the last time we talked about the transit feasibility studies that were being done by Hobart and Portage. You were just talking about that, getting those underway, and so what is the current status of those audits?
Those studies are almost done.
Mm-hmm.
They have gone through a lot of surveying in the communities, a lot of talking to the leadership in both communities, and then looking at all the facts and figures, the demographics, who lives there, where do they travel, how do they travel. So now the consultants have taken all that information, and at this point we have preliminary recommendations in terms of different types of service that may work for each city, and then anticipated costs.
Okay.
So that's a big hurdle right there, just getting the preliminaries out.
So for Hobart and Portage, for maybe to remind our listeners about the city of Hobart, do they have a transit system now in place?
They are doing demand response on a small kind of basis, and they are using the South Lake County Community Services.
I see.
The problem is there's a lot more demand in Hobart than South Lake can keep up with.
I see.
So it's getting a little frustrating where people want to ride and they call up and there's no capacity.
I see.
South Lake is booked a lot I mean, it's a popular service down there.
And then the same with Portage. How is that?
Portage actually has access to a little more service because the Portage Township trustee maintains buses that feed into the Bonner Senior Center. Mr. Clancy's done a great job with those buses, as have previous township trustees. So people who are affiliated with that center can use the bus. They take them all shopping once or twice a week, and then doctor appointments, and then of course the meals at the senior center. Other than that, in Porter County, you have both Opportunity Enterprises and Porter County Aging and Community Services. Both of those organizations do public demand response.
I see.
So that somebody could call and arrange a ride through either one of them as well.
So if you could remind our listeners, basically, with your job and the services that NIRPC is providing, why this, what NIRPC does in regards to providing funding for these services.
We are charged by the federal government with reviewing and then programming projects that use transportation money.
I see.
And basically for us that means the highway funds and then the public transit funds. It comes in different combinations, but the feds nationwide created agencies like ours to make sure it's a more coordinated process. Before the MPO, it's Metropolitan Planning Organization, before they were created, the federal government was in a big build mode after the end of World War II, and that was fine, building highways, except all of a sudden they're building highways through parks that a community just put in.
Sure.
Or they're going through subdivisions that nobody knew quite, we're going to be there. So you needed the locals more keyed in to what the plans were so that you weren't doing things like trying to put a federal a highway or an interstate, through already used public property.
Sure. And before we went on the air, we were just talking about all the great things and all the things that are happening. Again, it's the summer of 2016, and it just seems like construction season, road construction, all the highways, the towns, our communities. They're just bustling with activity. It's it's very exciting. And then to hear some of these feasibility studies that are being conducted with Hobart and Portage, just more services for our areas. So with those studies, how do people feel about public transit in those cities?
Both cities were overwhelmingly supportive of doing it. We have some detractors, some who say no, don't do it. It's too expensive, and that is to be expected. But it was kind of a surprise, the size of the population in both cities, that really were quite in favor of it.
Wonderful.
That was very encouraging. Yes.
So as these studies are being conducted and completed, what are the next steps? What would the next step be on this?
The next step is for the consultants are coming back in July to meet with. There's an oversight committee in each city, so they will meet with them, and from those committees elicit what they absolutely want to see as the recommended action.
I see.
For the final recommendation in essence that will come out of the studies. So those meetings are in the third week of July. We'll get that feedback. I'm going to be going to both city councils during July and presenting the information and all of that. And then once the initial the final recommendations from both committees are tightened up and put together, we're done.
Okay.
They'll issue that report with what came out of the cities, what's the recommended course of action, and then what the cost estimates are. At that point, it's really up to each city to determine implementation or not, or what level they want. The consultants are giving them options in terms of you can do X amount of trips and X service with like demand response in Hobart. If they wanted to add some vehicles and run a just demand response, they could do it for just under $500,000 a year.
Okay.
If they wanted to go fixed route, you have some flexibility there because they're right next door to GPTC, Gary Public Transportation Corporation.
I see.
And GPTC is very interested in regionalizing, getting out more, spreading transit
Outside of Gary.
outside of the city, outside of Gary. Sure. So they're very happy to see Hobart come into it, and will probably look at partnering with Hobart so that Hobart would do a contract with the city for fixed route, which actually is a lot more cost effective.
Sure. So basically, they're not duplicating the services; they're just duplicating, maybe getting us some additional routes or buses and drivers to do that.
Yeah, you just run. They've identified a couple of routes, potential fixed routes in Hobart, and then those would, of course, then tie in with the rest of the GPTC service area, so that you can access all the way to Chicago if you wanted to. Via Hobart to GPTC to either the South Shore or any of their vehicles going south into Crown Point. You have a lot more options.
Sure,
there.
That's exciting.
And Portage, it's not as cost effective to deal with GPTC because they're over there. Very cost effective to deal with either OE or Porter County if they wanted to do a contract for services with a demand response service. Just as much indication of the need for a fixed route, especially in Portage. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's both communities could also support fixed route.
I see. Okay.
So it'll be a tough decision for the cities and the mayors, and then coming up with the local match.
Sure. And then I think too, there's a lot of public comment that goes into this, and again, that I know there's always surveys. There's these are public meetings open to everybody, and again, I think as a citizen of those communities, it's very important to participate. You want all the input, positive and negative.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Sure, because then you're going to turn around and ask these people to financially support it. So, making sure they're well informed and give them as much information and as close to exact costs as we can.
It's Carl Lissick with Belinda Petroskey from she's a transit planner with the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and we're just talking about some of the feasibility studies that are being done with Hobart and Portage. And so, we are looking at some of the implications in Northwest Indiana, these additional public transit. So what are some of the environmental and economic things that we should be considering in some of these things, Belinda?
I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't recognize the increase in congestion in Northwest Indiana. And I think public transit, could make a big contribution to helping with that congestion. We are not going to be in a position to keep building our way out of congestion.
I see.
We don't own enough concrete. We can't make enough asphalt to really, really, really solve congestion. But public transit can play a role, and much more cost-effective than repaving the same piece of street over and over and over again. We can reduce the traffic, reduce the demand on the roads, improve your travel times, and certainly improve air quality. You take some of these vehicles, especially old ones, off the streets, and you're doing wonders for air quality.
So as we talk about, again, just as a resident of Northwest Indiana, so I mean, is there possibilities that I could ride one of these transit buses to and from work?
Sure, depending on where you live, absolutely. That's the plan. Is identify these attractions, if you will, but the destinations like Ameriplex and Portage.
Sure.
I go through there every morning on my way to work. Sometimes I cut through there, and the number of people coming to Ameriplex every day, just from when they first opened the very first thing till now, has just grown.
It really has,
exponentially.
Yeah, and they've done a great job there.
Yeah. Bringing, and it's going to be bringing more and more. Same thing with Hobart. They're developing that industrial park on the southeast side of town. The jobs that they'll be bringing in, and Hobart's even a little tighter to get around than Portage. Portage is a little more spread out. Hobart is a little more compact. So improving transit in Hobart, will do a lot for traffic flow.
Sure, and this goes hand in hand with the 2040 plan that NIRPC's had in place for years, and I know that constantly is getting updated. And again, all these public meetings that NIRPC does on basically a weekly basis, there is always some type of meeting going on with transportation planning, trails, health and safety types of aspects going on. So again, as a citizen of Northwest Indiana, please visit the NIRPC website, which is
www.nirpc.org.
So as we talk, Belinda, about all this stuff, and then we hear about the extension of the South Shore Line, how will that affect public transit?
I really believe that the more improvements they make to the South Shore, the more attractive, of course, that service becomes in terms of efficiency. It's going to be a much faster trip into Chicago, which is just really going to draw even more people to this part of Indiana. They're beginning to understand just how close we are to all the jobs in Chicago. And I think once the South Shore gets their double tracking project done, they're already running that morning express, early AM express train that's been very successful, I hear. It really reduced the time to Chicago, and that's going to just help tremendously. So you're looking at some really big development implications to the rest of the region, I think, with the South Shore. And then, of course, the South Shore with their Westlake Corridor project, a whole new rail line down the side, that side of Lake County, and again, it's going to be a fast trip. It's absolutely, I think, already drawing people over to the west side. Those communities over there are continuing to rack up big growth totals. So, yeah, the South Shore, then as those projects progress and more people, they might not live in Gary, Hammond, or East Chicago, but they still want to come up to the South Shore, the need for public transit should increase exponentially
Sure.
as well.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break right now, and you're listening to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm your host, Carl Lissick, and we'll be right back after this.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, and 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NIRPC.
So welcome back to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm your host, Carl Lissick of South Shore Clean Cities, here to bring you the latest information on green projects and topics across the nation. Our guest today is Miss Belinda Petroskey. She's a transportation planner with the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission of NIRPC. So, Belinda, we were just talking about all the great things that are going on within Lake Porter and LaPorte counties here. Let's talk about collaboration. And again, I think that is one of the things that maybe, as we talk about all this development, all these road improvement projects, all these transit improvement projects, how well that really NIRPC is the collaborator for all the communities, public and private businesses. And I think a lot of times, people from the outside don't know the role that NIRPC plays across our area and how important NIRPC is to economic development, environmental, and just different things that are going on. So, but I think with the collaboration that NIRPC has and the different committees and the information that NIRPC provides, can you expand a little bit on that and some of the things that you've been here for 30 years? 41 years, and again, I know our last conversation we had, I know that you're going to be retiring, and you're leaving your legacy on so many people and so many communities in our area, and just again, I wanted to thank you for that, Belinda.
Well, you're welcome. It's been a real joy these last 41 years. But as far as what's some of the collaborative things we've done, the National Lakeshore right now is working with the South Shore, as well as some of our planners in the office, on transit in the park. They've been trying to get something going for a while, and they were finally successful in getting a grant that was created just for the federal park system for transit from outlying areas of each park. So they have been successful in getting one, and we've been working with them on funding it long term, and then just where should they go with it. And they're looking at, of course, connecting people who come in on the train at Dune Park, go up to the state park or over to the National Lakeshore, or even connecting all the way up to Westlake, back to on the west side of Portage, Ogden Dunes. So that's what, and that project, like I said, is involved the NICD and our agency. And then we're looking at other partners that might help fund the chambers or even the now I don't want to put any of them on the spot. But the kinds of things, approaches we would typically make would be to, like, the Convention and Visitor Bureau. There's some discussion about how can you bring those people from the park into a business area like in Chesterton. Trying to work those things out so people see a benefit to participating. We had an absolutely wonderful experience, and it's ongoing service with LaPorte County, creating that transit triangle service. Right. That took a few years and a lot of talking, But the partnership, working through that, multiple levels of government. You had both the county and then 2 different cities. And then you had the university, Purdue North Central at the time.
Exactly.
They were, very desirous of having that service come to the campus there. And you have to work through those things, and there's lots of things in everybody's own organization that makes it hard or puts roadblocks. But I'll tell you, with that group, they worked through every one of them and stuck with it. And so today you have a very popular, growing in popularity service built on a collaborative exercise.
Sure.
Absolutely.
No, and I would totally agree with you because you see these conversations, and sometimes, let's face it, everybody wants the best thing for their community. There is not one public or a private official that I say that it's only for me, and I think again that's not a thing that we in our area get a lot of credit for, is all this collaboration and working together and at least discussing some of our options. And again, I think that's really the role that I've seen NIRPC since our involvement with NIRPC on all the great things, and with our involvement with as you're talking about some of these partnerships is as we start to introduce some of these new transit systems and opportunities, moving those towards alternative fuels, and we've seen that collaboration. And so change takes time, and again, I think in your 41-year career here with NIRPC, you have seen a lot of change.
Oh yeah.
So some of the other projects that are underway, I know the Broadway Rapid Transit Project. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's Gary Public Transportation Corporation, GPTC. Exciting project coming out of them, where they will have limited stops, but could be a very fast trip down Broadway through to Crown Point. They are working very hard with, especially the town of Maryville right now. They've had a lot of interest from Maryville citizens wanting to know how are they going to be able to access this service on Broadway. So now the town and GPTC are talking about a shuttle service within Maryville that will pick up people and bring them to the Broadway corridor. So there you have, an expansion already born of the creation of the corridor service. So, exciting project.
Again, when you're in Chicago, you see buses, you see the coordination with the trains, and it does work. Again, you go to any Cubs game. We've attended some meetings downtown in coordination with CMAP, which is the Chicago Metropolitan Group, in coordination. And again, I see all these different organizations collaborating. I know that you're collaborating with MACOG, which is the Michiana area, Michigan, Illinois, and then going all the way to Wisconsin. And I see all these collaborations, and then not just with roads. I see the freight transit planning.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
Which is huge. And again, I think all of us in Northwest Indiana have been stuck by a train.
At least once a day.
Yes, and again, I think the crossroads of America are right here in our backyard. And again, I think how do we coordinate all of these activities? It's not just passenger, it's freight, potentially the movement of some of the improvements that have been made already by the Gary Airport, and so like moving forward, what are some of the other top priorities that you see in our area?
I think a big priority is going to be the whole freight train business. Several years ago, NIRPC started building a relationship with the surrounding states, with Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan, particularly. And it was mostly, and part of that was born of the need to collectively or collaboratively address the air pollution problem. Northwest Indiana is getting tagged, as this terrible polluting entity. When you get into the science of air pollution, you then learn there are air sheds just like there are watersheds. So water flows in a given direction depending on what side of the divide they're on, and air quality is the same way. That air flows. So we're actually inhaling the carbon monoxide from the greater Chicagoland area. So how do you work? There are things you can do together to work on that and improve it. Not just Chicago, but Indiana doing the emissions testing. So we're sending cleaner cars into Illinois. Illinois had a emissions testing as well. So we share those burdens, and that's good. You're not alone. Good. Those are the kinds of things you want to improve on. The freight train business. These trains just don't come through Indiana. Come to Indiana. They come from somewhere and they're going all the way on up around the lake. So how you deal with that, and what's the best place to maybe relocate tracks or build new ones. But yeah, it's not just Northwest Indiana that's affected, and the collaborations, the relationship with Chicago, and all the airports. That's another whole ball game out there. Same things with the ports. We have one of the major ports in the state of Indiana is right here in our backyard. And there's only one other place in the state that has that, down at the other end on a river, which is nothing like being on the major lakes, the Great Lakes.
Which again, I mean, just you talk about economic development and all the, I guess, let's call them blessings that we have here in Northwest Indiana, and so how do we maximize those and market those to businesses
and they have to interconnect with those around us, and working on NIRPC's relationship with these states. We've formalized it in something called the Wing Spread Accord, where it commits to working together in a variety of areas. That's been just really a big help, generating the interest and giving people the impetus, to begin addressing cross-state line.
Well, we're almost out of time, Belinda. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to close on?
I will make a plug, because it's the hardest thing I face in dealing with public transit, and people are facing, is the lack of a local match. We don't have a dedicated source in most of Northwest Indiana to help support public transit. I think as I talk to people, especially as we've been doing Hobart and Portage, people really, in some cases, are desperate for improved transit. But I know every time we go into a community, people want you to come out and talk about this. Everybody says they want it, and then when it gets down to, okay, it's going to take this
X number of dollars
tax this way, or we can create public transportation corporations within municipalities because they get a chunk then of property tax. There are a variety of things a community, and that's also where the collaboration and partnerships, because large employers can help. The university in Valparaiso University is a big partner with the city of Valpo, whose transit system is just the poster child for the country in what you do to go in and create a successful system where none existed. I mean, that only happened when John Costas got elected. And that was a textbook. The mayor wanted it, and away they went. Wonderful project to work on. One of the best I've worked on ever.
Well, that's good. And again, I think as we see some of these other opportunities coming to fruition, we do have a model that we can follow, and we've got some experience in putting these transit systems together. So again, Belinda, on behalf of Northwest Indiana, on behalf of South Shore Clean Cities, thank you for everything, and we appreciate all your support, and look forward to having you on the show before you retire. So, and that will do it for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. And I'm your host, Carl Lissick. Thanks again to our guest, Miss Belinda Petroskey of NIRPC. And be sure to join us again on WIMS Radio and Girard Media for the next edition of the Green Radio Network. And visit us online at southshorecleancities.org. And thanks for joining us. And remember, it's never too late to begin your environmental legacy.